god is dead, and with the immortals' death came the plague, set to destroy us from the land given to us by them. As a gravedigger, you will be a line of defense, tasked with making sure those who are left to die and suffer may finally know everlasting rest. On this episode of Scheduled for Launch, join me and Jack of Casear Inc. as I learn about DOOMSONG, Lord Have Mercy Upon Us. We talk the system, working with large properties, and transitioning to your own first project. All that right here and more on Scheduled for Launch. Welcome to Scheduled for Launch, a podcast to discover the projects that you may have missed. This week, I'm really excited to be joined by somebody who I think we've kind of navigated the weird bits of Twitter by having a common acquaintance reach out and get us together. Jack, thank you so much for coming on to Scheduled for Launch this week to talk about both Casear Inc. and DOOMSONG. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on.
Yeah, of course. Like I was telling you earlier, Zach of Animon Stories reached out and they were like, hey, you got to talk to these people. They've done a lot of really cool stuff. They've finally formed their own studio and they're making this really, and it's super stylish. Kudos to your artist.
Yeah, shout out to Maritz Krebs.
Maritz, yes.
Black Crab Art over in Germany. It's absolutely fabulous.
Inking is so good, and I'll probably talk about the art a little bit more in a little bit, but you guys have something that is very cool in this space, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
That's fantastic to hear. Like, we were just chatting just before it went live, mostly complaining about Twitter and how we couldn't contact each other. But but yeah, it was mutual Zach of Animon Story who got us in touch, who I've worked with at River Horse for a few years. We worked on the My Little Pony role-playing game together, and I think he was with us when we did Labyrinth, the adventure game, and maybe not quite when we did Dark Crystal, but yeah, it's we go back.
It's great though, because you and the core team of Casear Inc., obviously you've grown a little bit, have been doing this for a while together, and that's something I'm really excited to talk about as well. But Jack, can you tell the audience a little bit about who you are? Yeah,
of course. I'm Jack Caesar, one of the members of Caesar Inc. I'm generally the rules guy for our products, so I do a lot of the numbers and dice rolls and try and tweeze some fun out of dice and probabilities, and generally think about how people roleplay and all of that stuff. We're a small studio. It's me and my brother's partner, and then we used Maritz Krebs, as we talked about, for this DOOMSONG project. So yeah, we're a fairly new company in terms of sort of being our own thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was originally a company started by my brother, by Chris, about, I want to say 10 years ago, as a basically the name that he freelanced under, Caesar Inc.
Okay.
As an illustrator and a graphic designer. That's the name he'd go under, and whilst we were doing work for other companies and this, that, and the other, basically, if either of us was doing anything freelance, it would be under Caesar Inc.
Okay.
But sort of in the last 6 months is when it's actually been a company, and we've been trying to actually, make a product and enter the world of independent business rather than services for other companies. So, let's see how that goes.
I'm sure that also being independent, it's got its own unique challenges that have come up.
Oh, yes.
Can you talk about that shift, though, from being part of, you said you were with River Horse, right? So that's quite a heavy shift.
Yeah, so, I mean, the biggest one is always in consistency and, like, time load and just trying to get stuff sorted. When you're when you're employed at a business, you're going to get your income every month, and it's someone else's problem whether the rest of the cogs are working and how much sort of flow is coming in and going out. And like the nice thing about project stuff is you are always sort of working towards creating something, and those things have an end, and you say, okay, we've done that thing, now we're moving on to the next thing. But sort of combining that with the and a monthly paycheck sort of gives you kind of, I think, the best of both worlds in that. But working for yourself, or for other people through yourself, is a lot more freedom, a lot more. Actually, I'm not interested in that project, or I don't think that project's going to. I don't think I'm the best person for that, or this, that, or the other. So like that kind of freedom to say no to stuff is really strong. But then you've also got the especially. So we're balancing this Kickstarter that we're running in October, DOOMSONG RPG, absolutely awesome stuff. I'm sure we'll talk about it.
We're gonna get
but trying to sort of balance the massive workload that we have to do on that, which is this on the hill in the horizon. We do this Kickstarter, and obviously it's a huge success and everyone loves it, and that's amazing. And then we can use that money to fund the business and make the thing happen and sort of eat. Yeah, there's a little bit of that as well. And sort of, so we've got that, and then trying to balance that with services for other companies and stuff that actually pays out money now or makes things work in the moment to moment, and trying to balance those two things is definitely part of the thing that I never really had to do whilst I was on the 9 to 5.
Yeah. You and the rest of the Caesar Inc. team, from what I understand, have been in the really cool position. We just talked about River Horse a little bit. You've handled some really beloved IPs in the past. The three big ones. I mean, My Little Pony you mentioned. We've talked about the Labyrinth and Dark Crystal adventure games, which are phenomenal. What's it like getting to handle something like that? Because it's very different than writing fiction, for instance. Like you said, your rules. And so I personally love the rule set for Labyrinth. So I'm wondering what that's like, translating cinema to the page.
So there's kind of this old philosophy of game design, of the difference between Euro games and Ameritrash, and you can probably guess who sort of decided to name that. But there's kind of, and I don't think it's super true, but there is some element of truth in it, of sort of the idea that Euro games are sort of designed sort of rules first, and sort of American style simulation often games are designed with the theme first. So some game will be like, how do we simulate Normandy? And okay, well, we need 1,000 dice and we need +1s here and this, that, and the other. Whereas something like Settlers of Catan is more like, oh, I've come up with this neat way things interact. What's the best theme to sort of get people into that? And so for me, I've always approached things theme first. When I one of the reasons I got into games was because of the fantasy of I like the idea of playing as an adventurer or as a fighter pilot or a this, that, or the other, and these games sort of evoke that feeling. And so, and obviously the best of both worlds is what you want. You want the game to sort of evoke the feeling of the theme, and the theme to bolster the mechanics of the game. Yeah. But when you're sort of coming at it from a license, from you've got the end point. You start with, this is what we want. We want something that evokes this license, this world. And you've got to go, okay, well, where's the game in that is the first question, which is sometimes very easy, sometimes very difficult. So I did the Worms game for Mantic recently. Okay. Based off of the Worms video game. And that one is like, where's the game in that? Oh, well, it's already literally a turn-based game. Like that question's very easy to answer. Actually translating it to a tabletop is much more difficult. But sort of where's the game in something like Labyrinth or in something like Dark Crystal is much more like, okay, so you've got to sort of distill what the fantasy of that world is and then try and make that as succinct as possible. So with the Labyrinth, it's this like exploring this wondrous world that kind of works on its own rules. You've got to have that comedy and that irreverence in there, and just a lot of Labyrinth actually was about basically getting out of the way of the players and giving them the tools to be as like off the wall and wild as David Bowie and the characters in Labyrinth can be.
Yeah.
And so that's why that book is, I think I've got it here actually, I think it's 30 pages of rules at the beginning.
Yep. That's how it starts off.
And a good load of that is like tips and tricks, and then some of that is also just, and I put this in almost every game that I make, RPG game that I make, of like a 2-page spread of just giving people permission to ignore anything I've written.
Yeah.
Like, just, these rules are here for you to have fun, cut them out, change them. Like, if they're not working for you, do something else. Like, if you want something harder hitting, then go find that, and you know, this is your world, and you have to make it yours as much as we've tried to make it yours. And that's why that book is just this sort of 30 pages of rules, and then just the wacky scenarios. The other sort of consideration there was that the sort of the standard or the ideal customer for that book was a fan of the original Labyrinth, but not necessarily an RPG player. So someone who's watched the Labyrinth in 1984, and they watched it when they were 13 or something, and have grown now, but they've never played role-playing games before. So that's why that one is like so simple and easy to grab a hold of, and especially on the GM side. That's where we basically came up with and really solidified that 2-page spread system of every location within that book is on a 2-page spread. You've got sort of the map and the bare bones on the left, and then you've got anything that sort of requires specific rules or deep dive like explanations and stuff on the right. So you can like start on the left page and you've got everything you need there, and then if they have questions about something, you've got more information on the right. The idea being that you can flick to almost any page, scan read it, and then get going. And that's just to sort of like that's kind of where we ended up bringing first Dark Crystal and now Doomsong as well, of this like actually trying to create a book that's really usable. I feel like I've gone off piece. What was the original question?
I was just asking what it's like to handle those big IPs.
Oh yeah, I've gone off piece. It's very different depending on who you're working with. Yeah. Those three that you mentioned, My Little Pony, and so Hasbro and the Henson Company. Yeah. They were really, really good to work with. Once you get over the role playing problem of, so these are set worlds with cannons, and saying, players can do whatever they like in them. Like that definitely sets the hackles up in a licensor. They're like, well, could they do something unmentionable? Could they, or could they, say that the Goblin King is, dead, or this or that, or like changing the cat. Like they often have these like hard rules in their style guides and stuff. Like, this can never happen. This is never mentioned. We don't deal with that. And so sort of saying, but this is a role-playing game. We actually don't have any control over any of that. Once you get over that hurdle, like, they were really good to work with. We have worked with licensors that are harder to work with.
Yep.
I'll not go into details on that
Yeah,
one.
don't do
But get blackballed. But, no, but like I totally get it. This is it's a super important part of a brand.
Yeah.
And so being very like defensive over how it's portrayed it's part of how you keep that brand sort of consistent and fresh and everything. And then as a creative, like I come along and say, oh, I'd really like to do this thing in your world. And I go, maybe. But yeah, no, so really, really interesting. And you get to see a lot of different fans. And I think the most important thing is like, yeah, as I said, sort of finding out what the game is and what people enjoy about that franchise, and then which is so much easier when you're already a fan of the franchise, which is something I've been lucky enough to have done several times. But even when it's not something you originally knew about when you sort of started work on it or anything like that, it's about finding out what the love is about, and then either bringing on the talent that can inject that love in, basically, or sort of working with it to really understand the license and building out from there to sort of create this product.
That was a far better answer than I expected. When I was just like, I love that I can play as a worm.
but that's actually a really interesting one, because the worm was quite hard to get in. Like,
really?
Well, not from a like licensor point of view, but from a power level and a gameplay and and it's actually something that we've ended up that you can play a like tiny little spider thing in the Dark Crystal as well, and but this idea of and the answer was actually, don't worry about it at all, like they'll work it out. but originally it was like, oh, how do we make playing a worm like useful and interesting, and like once the novelty of being very small is worn off, how do you keep them? But so much role playing is basically, especially in the Labyrinth, is basically like working out a puzzle and just chatting to each other, and then I'm pretty sure in the rules like there is actually no downside to being tiny apart from common sense. Like there is no like, oh, your move speed is 50% less or anything like that. It's just, you're small. Like, work it out.
So, we're going to finally move on to DOOMSONG. Yes. Lord have mercy upon us, because this is such a cool game. It's especially because this is your first really solid venture into something this big. Can you tell the audience a little bit about what DOOMSONG, Lord Have Mercy Upon Us, is?
I can indeed. So, God is dead. In the beginning, there was the Immortal. They created everything, including other gods. They immediately murdered the Immortal, and so became the traitor gods. They control so much of this dark fantasy medieval world, and their sort of power has led to, or they were trapped for a long time, and their breaking out of this power has led to the apocalypse. And that's where you come in. DOOMSONG is a game inspired by the biblical apocalypse, by medieval folklore, and by just horror and the general horror of the Dark Ages and the beliefs that people had in those ages. And so this is a world in which the main like church of the world follows the divine corpse, the dead immortal, and that has no power. They are dead. And then but everywhere else there are cultists and there are witches who follow the traitor gods and are given mystic powers and are sort of seduced to the dark side of magic. And like as gravediggers, which is what you play as gravediggers who are basically given this very simple job of digging graves for the dead, which is made twice as difficult by the fact that as it is the apocalypse, hell is full, and the dead are coming back. The hell is full. They're being rebuffed at the gates of hell and being sent back to their bodies to rise as the unquiet dead. So you're playing gravediggers in the middle of an apocalypse, trying to deal with just stuff that was never in your job description, and above all that, pestilence, the first horseman of the apocalypse, has ripped out of the world a kingdom, an entire kingdom, which unfortunately you are now trapped in, which is now known as the PlagueScape, and you need to survive. You need to try and maybe find a way of breaking that curse, and you're going to fail. Your first character is going to die. And you're going to make another character, and you're going to make more, and it's this story of the guild rather than sort of the individual characters in a TTRPG that's very much based on horror, lethality, and just trying to do the best you can in a world that's crumbling around you.
I think one of the coolest things to me was the focus on pestilence as the horseman, because you see a lot of use out of the other horsemen. You see a lot of war or death, and I am forgetting the fourth one right now. Famine, yes. You don't see famine.
It's not as if we have more books planned. No.
But to me, outside of, what was it called, Darksiders, you don't really see a lot of use with the Horsemen of the Apocalypse as major pieces. And so the fact that you're in this scape and you're dealing with arguably one of the, I mean, all the horsemen are bad, but this one's visually quite terrifying compared to the others. It's such a cool thing to handle. What was some of the process of narrowing it down on the Plaguelands and the PlagueScape and getting there?
So the author, Morgan, started writing about 4 years ago. So it was actually before coronavirus, before for a while we were all in a PlagueScape. But which was this sort of moment, because she started writing it, and then a year later, or it might have even been less than that, a few months later, suddenly everyone's thinking about the plague and all of this stuff, and it's is this the best timing in the world or the worst timing in the world? I don't really know, because it's definitely something to think about. There is a little bit of that, just getting thoughts out and putting that sort of art onto the page, rather than sort of just holding onto it. But I think in a lot, and I'm definitely not the lore guy. Morgan's the one to ask about some of the specifics, but I believe the first rider is pestilence, and so the original plan, which we managed to convince her to sort of scale it back, maybe from 7 books to just the 1 or 2 if you include the rule book. But of doing this volume focusing on pestilence, the first sort of sign of the biblical apocalypse. So you've essentially got you've got the 4 horsemen. You've got the war on heaven, silence in heaven. There's the 7 seals of the apocalypse, which if things go absolutely amazingly, we can use. We have sort of plans for each of the books, very much skeletons at the moment, to sort of build outward. And our ideal sort of world is to, over the course of those books, rip this world apart. It's an apocalypse. We want to destroy the world. We love the idea of this fantastical changing world. There's something in a lot of fantasy where worlds don't seem to change. Elves live 1,000 years, and over those 1,000 years, nothing seems to massively change. There's some ancient civilization or something, and that's always a shame to me, because the best stories are in times of, interesting times, times you would never wish upon anyone. But but having these like moments of great change, and what greater change is there than the literal biblical apocalypse?
That's pretty significant.
Having that, and then sort of by the end of it, sort of having destroyed all your Lego or Legos, and sort of thrown everything around and sort of destroyed everything. If there's a big building in the game, there's going to be a set scene at some point. There's going to be a tsunami. There's going to be something that just rips this world apart. And so that was kind of part of the influence of that idea of, actually we want a dynamic world that's changing, and taking inspiration from that. Dark Ages isn't really a fair way of describing the era, but that Dark Ages idea that everything was in decline. It was quite a pervasive sort of philosophy of, we saw the Roman Empire, we saw the heights that humanity could get to, and we have all these monuments that we don't know how to build, and we have all these and we know that we know that we've sinned, and we know that we are going to be punished, and from the looks of it, we are being punished, and the world is going down the watershed. So it is that that vibe, playing around in that sort of very macabre horror is something that we find cathartic and interesting.
It blows my mind too when we're looking at the theme of this game, or the genre, I should say, not even the theme, because the theme is very different. But it is that macabre horror, and you don't see that a lot set in fantasy, or specifically Dark Ages medieval. And I'm not sure why, because I feel like they are a match made in heaven, for lack of terminology. What drew you to the Dark Ages, the biblical apocalypse, and really hunkering down and building out rules to interact in a world like that?
So Morgan is a doctor of literature, and so she has a lot of love for that old school. Old school makes it sound like the 80s, but 1400s and classical stuff, medieval folklore, the original King Arthur tales and things like that, where stuff was just dark and had weird edges to it that just don't sort of make sense in a lot of ways, is a really interesting sort of thing about horror, because horror is about not knowing a lot or knowing too much, and so she was sort of drawn to that that vibe, and that from that sort of literature, and working that into a game. Then essentially I was brought on after a couple of years, or 3 years even, started looking at it about a year ago, to basically build a system around it, taking in her ideas and sort of creating something that both emulated what she wanted out of the world, and also, again, with the same thing as Labyrinth, got out of the way. That's the really important part of a lot of a role-playing system, is actually getting out of the way of yourself. It's really easy to write rules. It's actually not writing rules that's a really hard thing to do. You can write, I could fill books and books and books with rules, and it would be impenetrable and no one could read it. It's sort of picking what out of that actually builds the theme you're working towards, and what detracts from it, and what is necessary for the building blocks for other stuff to work. One of the first ideas that made its way into the game, that was the trying to create this theme and solve this problem, is this sort of problem I've had with a lot of horror games, where I find there's two like distinctly different opposing problems. There's with the character creation in specific. If you have a character creator that is very detailed and allows you to, roll a d10 for the amount of follicles in your nose and sort of put skill points everywhere and have all this, then that's great. And it gives you this sort of attachment to your character. You're like, oh, I know so much about my character, and I've spent, at minimum, I've spent an hour thinking about them. And why do they have 10 points in mechanics? Oh, they must have spent some time with that. And you have this, attachment to your character, and that's great. That's what we want. And so when you're playing this game, like you play the game and they see something they shouldn't, their eyes start bleeding and they're ripped apart by 1,000 tentacled monstrosities. And that's a really visceral moment in that, you've just lost a friend, you've just lost someone you know a lot about, and that that wrenches you, and that's sort of part of that feeling is what we're aiming for a lot of the time in this sort of tense horror environment. And then you've got to spend an hour making another character, and you're like as strong as that moment was, you've now got this bookkeeping to do, and and maybe you're not really in the mood because you've just lost a character, and so. And the other end of that, the sort of the obvious solution is, oh well, just have a system where your character is like a few stats, like you have 6 stats and pluses to some of them, and bam, you've got a character and you're done. And the problem with that is you get into this slightly more, which is not a bad thing, but it's maybe not quite what we're going for. But that more sort of OSR, like, oh, I've got a fighter and I'll name him when he gets to 2nd level. This sort of, if he survives the session, maybe I'll think a bit about his character. And so that's why a huge chunk of that the demo adventure that's available on our website, if you pop on over to Caesar.inc, you can find the sort of the skeleton of that character creator, which we took a lot of inspiration from Traveller, and sort of doing that life path system where, okay, where were you born? Okay, did you become a pickpocket or a member of the city guard? And then you choose one of those and you get a random event. And did you, why did you leave the city guard? Oh, because I found a heretical item and, confiscated it from someone. Oh, so you start with this profane relic, but the church is not very happy with you. And sort of, so it's a system that once you know it, takes 10 minutes. Like the first time you run through it, usually, because I'll always run that as part of the demo adventure because I think it's such a like nice little part of it rather than doing the pre-made characters.
Yeah.
And so that like character creation process, once you're down with it, it's about 10 minutes. And the first time you do it with the GM, like running it with you, it's like 15-20. Like it's such a like quick system, and at the end of it, you've not just got a character with stats, you've got a character with a story. You've got, oh, I was a guard and I might have these ideas, and it says on my character sheet that I'm reckless, so I'll lean into that a bit. And it gives you these like fairly blunt hooks of like, oh, I'll lean into this for a bit and I have a feel for my character, and now I care about them, and now I will care when they die. And I'll maybe retreat from stuff that I wouldn't have retreated from if they were a nameless character. And sort of this, like, trying to balance that weight of like ownership over a character with the actual time you spend making that character, trying to slim that down, was one of the first things that we worked on when Morgan sort of basically came to me with the vibe. It was like, this is the world, and I want people to explore it in this way, and I want death to happen like fairly regularly. I want it to be an ever-present thing in the world. And a lot of it was, so that's the like effect side of that, and the other side was essentially filling it with excuses for the GM to be mean, which is something that's actually it's really hard to get to get GMs to kill players.
Yeah.
That's very hard, and it should be to kill characters. And that's sort of where the Doom coin comes in, because quite often that like takes it out of the GM's hands and says to the player, "You're going to flip that coin because the tails means you're probably dead." And sort of trying to push the GM to be cruel and to be mean, and sort of give them excuses almost to hide behind. It's like, oh well, it says in the rules you're dead. I'm sorry. was another sort of those sort of philosophies, trying to push people to that. So it's been a lot of fun, and it's, despite the fact that it's not an IP game. I mean, it is our own world, and also being able to be there and say, it'd be really useful if there was a Operi at the bell tower, because that would sort of tie together a bit more of a monster to hunt the players, blah, 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 and sort of coming up with these ideas and going, this would be a really good idea, and Vulcan being able to go, well, that doesn't actually work because the Operi is a creature of frenzy, and that doesn't really fit with but being in that room with the actual creator the whole time, whereas in the past I've always been talking to licensors, and licensors aren't that often, that they might have a line to the creator, but that's just adding another sort of step for miscommunication. So being able to be with the creator and change stuff if necessary, or sort of get the answer as to why something's that way on a metaphysical level, has been really fun. And it's that theme focused design has been a real blast on this project.
I do like that this game is set up to be somewhat GM antagonistic while still rooting for the party overall. I know listening to that sounds super weird for other folks out there. This is a very interesting game with some really, really cool choices, especially for a horror genre. And a lot of that comes down to how the system runs. So can you tell us a little bit about how dice work in this game, and specifically that Doom coin? Because you hinted about that a little bit. I love the Doom coin a lot for this game.
So and one of the things I really like how it turned out is the standard check. So originally, I sort of had this mad idea where, what if almost everything in the game was tables, rolling on tables? And you can see a bit of that DNA in the character creator and in the special check tables. But originally it was you roll on a table for almost everything, and each table would have prompts for the GM. So when you attack a monster, you roll on a table, and if you roll high, it's oh, here's a prompt, you do some wound to the creature, but blah blah blah. And that sort of got a bit cut down and cordoned off, and it was way too overcomplicated, and coming up with these 6 things for every action the players might take, and then asking the GM to define what the players were taking and then find the right page. And it was honestly asking too much. But so what we distilled that down to, because the heart was quite strong, is the standard check, which is, in D&D that would be roll a d20, add your modifiers to it, and if you get over the target number, yay. In our game, essentially, you roll a d6. There'll be a difficulty, usually 5, and you'll have some pluses and minuses depending on your traits and your gear and your conditions. So they're all really flexible. They're all really oh, I'm burly, and that's a descriptor of your character. There's no rules attached to being burly, except for when you're making a check, you might say to the GM, oh, does being strong help in this? Does the fact that I'm burly help in this? He goes, yeah, sure, +1, because it's kind of related, or +2, yeah, you're trying to lift a rock. That's perfect for this. Similarly, if you're trying to crawl through a tunnel, burly might be a minus. So it's all really conversational, really fluid on the going in. And this was fairly intentional. I wanted that fluffy, conversational part of, oh, can I get a bonus for this? Oh, what if I loop the rope around? Does that give me a this? And so you end up with a bonus. You end up with a d6 and a bonus, and that's sort of where mechanically the mechanics take over. Is you've now got this immutable number on a die and a plus to that number, and you can get 3 results. You can get under the target difficulty, which is usually failure with cost, which means you failed at what you're trying to do, and the cost is comes from the GM. There are a couple of sort of suggestions. So you might break the tool you were trying to use. You might take a little bit of damage. You might attract the attention of villains in the area or something. Then if you roll equal to the difficulty, you've got success with cost, which means you've succeeded on what you're trying to do, but you incur a cost similar to the failure with cost, but you've got a success. And then right at the top, you've got success. So if you roll over the target difficulty, you've just got success and you don't incur a penalty. On top of this, after you've rolled, you have the chance of flipping the Doom coin. So the Doom coin is like this mystical artifact. It's handed around the table. Only one person can be doomed, have the Doom coin, at any one time. And if you choose to flip it, you gain the Doom coin from whomever has it, and you give it a flip. If you get a heads, you like go up one step on that effect. So if you had failure with cost, now it goes up to success with cost. And if you get tails, it goes the other way, so it comes down. And then there are sort of 2 spaces off the top and off the bottom of this table: critical success and critical fail. So what will really often happen is if you roll a failure for something, you've got the Doom coin. You could flip the Doom coin. You could, and if you get a heads, you've just turned that failure into success with cost, which is a success. And often success is like super important. We really try and emphasize in the game, only make players roll a check for important stuff. It's for interesting and dangerous things that you're rolling a check for, or things that could have some way of being detrimental on a failure.
Yeah.
So you've got this chance. You can mitigate that failure. You can turn it into a success. Or if you get a tails, that's a critical fail, and that's basically just a license for the GM to come up with the worst way that could have gone wrong. So, and we in the full book, we literally like have a page dedicated to this of like, if they're jumping a chasm, a failure is like they look at the jump and go, "There's no way I can make that." A critical failure is they try and they make it exactly halfway. Like that's the sort of difference. Like it is how bad could this have gone, and so, but what that means is critical failure isn't I rolled a 1. Critical failure is I rolled low and then I gambled. I pushed my luck and it's my fault. And kind of because it's your fault, when the GM says, "Well, you fell down the chasm," like you're kind of like, I really shouldn't have pushed that, rather than, screw this die, it rolled a 1, which is a really interesting like dynamic, and I think it bleeds a lot of the frustration out of rolling badly, because you could have taken the lesser. Like it is your fault. You flipped that coin, and you took on the risk, and because it is 50-50, it's a coin. Like your brain, there's that old thing of like, people are really bad at probability and quite often equate anything as 50-50, like in this sort of, even when it's like quite heavily weighted one way or the other, because especially with binary choices where it's hit or miss, they go 50-50. It's that kind of thing in D&D where people roll a 12 and go, ugh, like, no, that's above average. That's quite a good roll. But you're flipping that coin, it's 50-50, and it's your fault if you've just failed. And again, the other side of that is if you get a crit, if you've sort of pushed something up into like something amazing, then you've just beaten the odds. You feel great. And so that's really the core mechanic, and that's like 90% of the game. That's this like push and pull mechanic that just runs the whole thing, runs the whole show. And in play, it's been really nice seeing that that move. Originally in the design phase, that was a it was a special die with basically +1, +2, +3, and -1, -2, -3 that you could roll basically afterwards. Which just added another layer of doing some maths and kind of it didn't have the vibe. There's something so good, and in the Kickstarter we are adding in a metal Doom coin as part of the the pledge. Yeah, if you get both the books, you get the Doom coin, or the deluxe pledge has like everything in it, including a miniature of Father Plague that holds the coin on your table. It's really cool.
I love that.
Yeah, there's something so fated about a coin. There's something so like you can imagine the gods playing with a coin. You can imagine the like. There's a lot more weight to it, whereas a special die that's got -1, -2, and -3 just feels like a gamey thing. Something like. So yeah, it was a really good change that, and it's. I think that's one of the mechanics that I'm like most happy about in DOOMSONG, and it's something you're interacting with so often.
There is a level of threat or promise that comes with a coin for some reason, and maybe it's just how society treats a coin flip. I know that the Doom coin will be the killer of many a character for me because I love to gamble.
But, yeah, and it's it definitely is. It's this this reckless thing, and especially we've been playing a lot of one shots recently because we've been demoing it, and the amount of times that flipping the Doom coin does end in something terrible happening to someone losing a hand or gaining some sort of permanent problem to their character, and sort of going, oh, if this was not a one shot, I guess that's kind of just me now. Like, there's this one session that I do quite often as the demo sort of session. It's quite nicely sort of self-contained, called the Bell Tower, which I think on Tabletop is doing a thing of. So you might be able to find a video of it fairly soon. And so in that one, basically, if you go into the bell tower, there's these constantly ringing bells, and if you fail your check against the bells, essentially, you get the condition bad hearing. Conditions are basically like traits, but you can get rid of them. They're like injuries, like you've got a broken arm or something that can be healed one day, whereas traits are something integral to your character. Yeah. So it can be good or bad. And so yeah, if you get if you fail on that, then you get bad hearing. If you critically fail on that check, then like even when you move away from the area, even if you like destroy the bells, doesn't matter. You will hear those bells for the rest of your life. And you just have that tolling of the bell in your head, which gives you this sort of, bad hearing. You can't hear stuff because you're just constantly hearing these bells in your head, which is one of those, because horror is also kind of about permanence for me, like whether it's the psychological like aftermath of something. It's something I find really powerful about the first scene in Aliens. The first the first scene is the dream, isn't it, of the chest burster. But that first whole, like, I think it's quite a long, like it's half an hour or something in that, where it's all just about Ripley getting over the trauma. Well, not getting over it, but pushing past it and deciding to like go ahead with this very difficult thing she has to do, despite the damage she's doing to herself. And that's part of that world that we are that we're creating in a fun and safe environment, obviously. Which is another of the interesting things about horror. And I do hasten to add that if you're running like any role-playing game, but especially like a horror role-playing game, like know your group, make sure everyone is on the same page about the kind of things that are going to come up, and play it to have fun. Games are supposed to be fun.
There are so many cool things that you have in this. I know that, like, for instance, having gear that helps you will like bolster. Like, for instance, if you're doing a surgery roll and you happen to have a first aid kit, that could give you bonuses, and that I believe that's a special roll too. That example would be a special check, correct?
Yeah. So the special checks are kind of the what do you call it? The remains of that thing I was saying of what if everything was tables, which was actually the original working title for the rule set before it changed to Doomsong. Apparently, it wasn't catchy. Of these special checks, so in theory, you could run the whole game without ever touching any of these special checks. If you wanted to do surgery, you could just go make me a roll and work out what would work for your group. But this is like, it's kind of us giving advice to the GM of like, oh, this is kind of how we'd do it. This is kind of how we'd do a success with cost and a failure with cost and all of that sort of stuff. So surgery is one of those sort of special roles, special checks. And as you say, if you have like a cleaver and medicine, that sort of thing, that's kind of the useful gear for that kind of thing.
The last kind of role that I want to talk about, because I think it covers, are 3 different types of checks. That's combat. How does combat run?
So this is another space that's quite interesting. We have a unique little, or at least I believe it's unique. I'm sure that it's been done somewhere else. Everything has. There is no new idea under the sun. Combat system where basically at the start of each round of combat, everyone gets 2 dice, unless they've been injured, in which case just 1 dice, and sets them to two different sort of action steps. So between 1 and 6, might set 1 die to 1 and 1 die to 3. And the NPCs and the PCs do all of this. Then you go through your actions. So anyone's got a 1. So if any NPCs have a 1, they do a thing. If any players have a 1, then they can do one of the sort of actions available in step 1, which are like small actions, like, you can aid another player in something they're trying to do, or you can draw your weapon. And then that goes all the way down to sort of 5s, which is your heavy, slow attacks, and so all of your light attacks are like up at the top end of the like initiative, and all of your heavy and slow stuff is at the bottom end. So you're kind of balancing this, like, do I want to do a small thing before the enemy can act, or do I want to do a big thing maybe after the enemy has acted, if they haven't ripped my head off? And that sort of and that ties in really strongly with. So the players all have like a standard action bar, basically, and some options in there.
Yeah.
Every NPC, or pretty much every NPC in the adventure, has their own action block. So when you're going up against something, like it might act in a way you've never seen before. It has a 3, so you know it's acting on step 3. But what it does on step 3 is anyone's guess. Until you've sort of fought this thing a couple of times, maybe learnt a bit about it, then you start to learn its rhythm, and that's a really strong part of horror. Again, is that like we don't know how to fight this thing. We don't know what's this thing's capabilities. There's a lot of monsters in Doomsong that swords just aren't the way to fight them. There's Sefts, which are like ghosts, which can't be harmed by anything that was made after they died. And there's tons of there's this bramble monster called the Edelvine, which is like a wicker wolf tied together with snakes. And you can bash that thing apart, but the snakes just sort of drift off. They go into the forest, they find more vines, and sort of create themselves back again. And it's like being hunted by a wicker Terminator. And so, but it's something I really enjoy in games like Dungeons and Dragons, and it's so rare in games like Dungeons and Dragons where you're fighting a gargoyle or something, and you go, oh, none of these things on my character sheet help me here. Like, I can't hurt this thing. Oh, does anyone have that crystal that we found in the cave 3 years ago that when you throw it does thunder damage or whatever. Oh, maybe that'll work. And sort of this kind of spitballing of ideas. And so, that we wanted all of the monsters to basically have a bit of that in them. So there are definitely monsters that are essentially just some, dude with a sword or things that are very much sort of mundane villains and things to fight. And those things almost are palette cleansers. And, this thing, you stab it and it dies. How novel. And the other sort of really interesting thing about combat, for me at least, is the retreat step. So originally, retreating was a step 6 action. So you had to set a die to 6, and at the end of everyone's action, basically you got to retreat. Trouble is, no one at the start of a round wants to retreat. Like anything could happen. You might roll a 6 and flip the Doom coin and chop the thing's head off, and it might all go great. So you don't really want to go with the defeatist. Oh, we need to get out of here before you've even seen what's happened. So what we did is we took it out of that, and it's now just an end of combat round thing. So at the end of every combat round, you can try and retreat. You can try and retreat as a group or individually, and you always will retreat, basically. You always get away, but there is a check involved. It's a retreat check, and if it goes poorly, it could go really poorly. It could, free attacks and dangerous things happening to your character. And so basically choosing to retreat, it has its own inherent dangers, but it is always successful. And so you are always going, like, if we're not going to win this fight, if we're not going to survive it, we could just take our chances and try and flee. And that's something that we always wanted there as an option, because it's something that's, I have distinct memories of particular games. Go back to D&D again, of like trying to do the retreat thing, but because everyone's taking turns and no one wants to be the first one to retreat, everyone's like, "I'll hold them off, you run away," and then the next player's turn is like, "Well, I'll stay here, but definitely we should run away." And then the paladin is like, "Well, I'm not going to be the first one to run. I'm the paladin." And then you go back round to the top of initiative, and you're in the same place you were, but with fewer hit points or whatever. So we definitely, like, there's this stage where everyone can say, "Actually, should we book it?" And that means that I've not had a combat sort of last more than 3-4 rounds, because either the NPCs are getting the snot kicked out of them and go, actually, they're going to run. They're going to get away. They're going to try and get away anyway. And if they do, essentially what that does is that takes you out of that combat system, but it doesn't mean you're out of danger. You could give chase, you could try and hunt them down, but then you're back into the standard check environment. Yeah. So, you're making a check to track them or to run them down and persistence hunt and sort of get to them. And so, which is another thing of like, I'm trying to instill in people, like, to use the tools for what they need to be used for. So like the combat works for combat. It doesn't work for chase scenes. What for that you want to run chase scenes using standard checks and other tools and stuff. So that retreat sort of step really means that there's this very clear line of combat's over. You've run away. Like we're out of combat. We're breaking that, but not having to end the combat with one side's completely dead.
Mm-hmm. I think that DOOMSONG does a really good job of breaking up the different types of checks that you have. We went over the 3 main ones, but it also all feels connected and appropriate for what you're doing or what you're trying to get. It just gets right in. They weave together so well, and it's very black and white on where it is. It's nope, combat's done. We're in standard checks. Okay, you broke your foot. We're gonna reset the bone. What's the special check say? It's beautiful. I love it so much.
Or replace it with a dog's leg, one of the two.
Or replace it with a dog's leg. Okay, so Jack, I've actually just looked up at the time. We've been going for an hour now. And I think we need to start wrapping it up. But I got a couple more questions for you just to kind of clear things out here.
All right, I'll try and not ramble off piste.
Oh, that's okay, because they're a little bit they're questions with definitive answers. So, well, except for the one. Do you have a date for when the Kickstarter is going to be going live?
We do indeed. October 17th.
October 17th. Okay, so let's see.
Less than a month.
Looking at
definitely
a month from,
less than a month.
A month, yeah, less than a month for this. But when this one comes out, I believe it'll either might be a week from the release of this episode, actually. So that would be great. Yeah, that's great. I'm excited about the Kickstarter. I think you guys are going to do great. Jack, this one's... I hope so, too. Jack, this one's really specifically for you, though. But what is it about the role-playing game space that keeps you here? What is it about creating in this space that you enjoy?
For me, it's the stories and the variety in them. I've spent a lot of time... just about to... I'll ramble off piste. I've spent a lot of time, thinking about and asking and trying to work out why people play role-playing games, and there's 100 answers. There's loads of stuff that attracts people to them, and I think understanding that is such an important part to running a good game. And if you have players who are interested in the interpersonal drama and the characters and the sort of character play, then that's very different from a group that's interested in the story, which is very different from a group that's interested in the combat or the tactical challenge. And for me, there's like everyone, I'm obviously a medley of all stuff, but it's the unique storytelling challenges, that emergent storytelling, that sort of group narrative, I think is something that's just so unique about the medium. And there's so many things that you can do in it that you can't do in any other medium, that I find fascinating. And the sort of the experiments that other people are doing and sort of running, it always just makes me really interested to try new stuff and to humbly add my experiments into the pile.
No, I love that answer. That's great. Like I said, I really like DOOMSONG. I'm a horror fan, and that's already great. I like games that have lethality that makes sense instead of just having a GM throw 5 dragons at you, because I have seen that. And in not a critical role kind of sense where it's 5 set piece dragons, it's just 5 dragons land on the board. Oh no, you're dead.
Rather than 1 5-headed dragon.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that DOOMSONG's going to stand out in its own really cool way. Jack, where can people find out more about you, Caesar Inc., and DOOMSONG, Lord Have Mercy Upon Us?
So first place people should go, if they want to find out more, is to the Kickstarter page, which you can find by searching for DOOMSONG, or in our Twitter bio or Facebook or anywhere, probably linked somewhere around this. Who knows? And that gives you all of the information of not stretch goals. There aren't any stretch goals, which you'll see why on our page. But all the information on add-ons and what's in the Kickstarter and all of that stuff you'll find there. If you want to learn a bit more about Caesar Inc. in general, you can go to caesar.inc, which is our website, and you can sort of see what projects we've worked on. And if you're interested in making something together, we certainly do provide those services. And if you want to just sort of chat with us, then another good place is to join our Discord, which is very sort of little friendly space at the moment.
Yeah. As always, audience, those links are going to be in the description down below. Jack, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. Like I said, I lost track of time. I had such a good time talking about this game.
Oh man, I'm glad. I felt like maybe I was talking your ear off a few times.
Oh no, not at all.
I do sometimes just find myself like on a track and going, I think that this isn't related to whatever the question was at all. I've just rambled off on a tangent, but hopefully it's all content.
And audience, thank you so much for listening. Caesar Inc. and DOOMSONG, Lord Have Mercy Upon Us, are launching on Kickstarter very, very soon, or may have already launched. Go check it out in the link there below. Till next time, though, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Thank you so much to Jack for joining me on the podcast this week. DOOMSONG, Lord Have Mercy Upon Us, has been a slight obsession of mine since we had that conversation, and I think using the demo book alone, I've done like 20 read-throughs of it. What I'm trying to say is that it's super cool, and I can't wait to see what comes from it, especially when I heard about how excited folks were to find out that I had an interview with them. I'm just really excited about DOOMSONG, and I think you'll like it too. Check that top link in the description below, and get yourself notified on Kickstarter to be reminded to back them on the 17th of October. And thank you all for joining me again, especially on this episode, because, fun fact, it's super late here, October 2nd, and I'm re-recording this all because I forgot to do an intro, and tomorrow's my birthday, and I don't have time to do it tomorrow. I forgot to do the outro, that's what I'm getting at. Some actual announcements, though. If you like my voice and you want to see or hear more from me, throughout the month of October, starting on the 11th, I'm going to be joining Tales from the Table, participating in a Five Nights at Freddy's inspired Kids on Bikes miniseries called One Night at Ollie's. That'll be Wednesday evenings. I think it's starting at a time that will be listed in the next episode. I'm also joining Jack of RPGs Uncovered, Telwood Blaze from The Gamer's Rest, and the Eldritch entity, The Eye, each Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern to do a multiplayer playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3 called Behind These Eyes. It's been a lot of fun so far. There's audience interaction if you go onto Jack's Twitch, which is RPGs Uncovered. You can influence the stories, or you can join me on my Twitch, which is Astroceratops, and come and chat with me. I've also been playing Darkwood, which is hella spooky. Finally, I'm still on Tale of the Void, but we now go every other week at 8 Eastern instead of weekly. It was just getting too hard for us. Our next episode is going to be on the 10th, so if you want to learn more about Veil the Void or listen to our antics in the Butterfly Effect, that's where to find me. Thank you all so much for listening to that, and if you like the show, tell a friend. Oh, and one last thing. With Twitter being the shit show that it is, I'm mostly on Blue Sky now, so if you're over there, you can find me at Scheduled4, that's the number 4, launch. Take care all, hope to see you somewhere out there. Bye.